Okay, so welcome back to Digital Perspectives, everybody. We are sitting here with Diana Adachi, who has been a part of Accenture and Hard Yaka and Yaka. Is it Yaka Labs?
Yaka Labs.
Yaka
Yes.
Labs. And you have had many years experience in this blockchain crypto space. Where would you like to start? Because I believe you started at Accenture. Do you want to start at Accenture? Because you have an extensive background here. We could talk all day.
Thank you. We can talk about Accenture. I actually wanted to talk about the present and put that sort of give a sense of where we're at right now. And I will go back to the days of Accenture, which was probably about 5 years ago when I really got involved in blockchain. But I find that what's obviously very interesting and very newsworthy right now is the OCC in basically allowing for banks to be custodians for digital assets. I mean, that is a major, in my mind, a major announcement and a major sea change. To me, it sets the right tone, sets a positive tone going forward. And so now let me take you back, a few years ago when I was a global lead for Accenture in blockchain. And in around 2015, I had a lot of interactions with banks, financial services industry, and they were all looking at what does blockchain mean, and I did the due diligence on Ripple with a team at Accenture. So Accenture put money into Ripple, and part of that was really because Accenture saw the opportunity and saw the change that potentially could occur with the banks and with the corresponding banking model. So at that time, what the work we were doing was just trying to figure out how will all this come together, not just for the financial services industry, but through other industries. And if you look at where blockchain was then and where it is now, and what I've seen is, 2016 even, other industries outside the banking industry, they didn't even want to talk about blockchain because in their minds, a lot of people still misinterpreted blockchain as Bitcoin. And so companies just were not interested in looking at, cryptocurrency. And so part of the process was just educating people, the difference between the two. And, fast forward today, I mean, that's, people have certainly understood the differences, and corporations everywhere are in some way, shape, or form have different blockchain implementations either underway or as in production. And so at that time, what we were starting to see emerge is supply chains, financial supply chains, trade finance, digital rights management. Those were the kind of the industries that made sense and were ripe for disruption. And if we think about today, where we're at in terms of just what's been facing us with this pandemic, supply chains around the world have had to start to retool because everything, while it's been global and that there's been some obviously major gains by having a global distribution, they're certainly, as we've seen, very problematic because we don't have local distribution. So, so I think that at that time when I was speaking to a lot of these companies, and these are really the top Fortune 500, they were just trying to get their heads around it, trying to think about it, trying to understand the theory. And so a lot of this was just use case and it was theory. And then it started to change over the last few years. And I think you see a lot of what we're seeing now is a lot of blockchain projects that have become a lot more mature. And in my mind, a couple of things about that is that the governance structures that were in place initially, so starting with Bitcoin to where they are and moving to today, they're a lot more sophisticated in terms of the way in which they manage an ecosystem or network. So, and that's a big change as well. It's becoming a lot. There's maturity in this technology. So So, that change of applications where we are globally with the usage of blockchain. And, the interesting things that as we talked about was when I started off with around the OCC and in the banking industry, about 3 years ago, there was a lot of these blockchain projects that, were releasing these tokens, and then the SEC started to clamp down because there were so many projects that were just had the wrong consequences of them. And so what was interesting is that in the beginning of this year, Hester Pierce, she basically is suggesting that companies will have kind of a 3-year moratorium to prove their project, the token that's coming from those projects, have a utility capability versus just about raising money.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That we know that signaled to me something big in the market as well. So you start to see that, you see the OCC, and another thing you see is the likes of people like Paul Tudor Jones, who is this very well known hedge fund investor, and he's even said, hey, I'm putting some of my investment into Bitcoin. They're big, but he's behind it. 3 years ago in 2017, Jamie Dimon said, Bitcoin, it's nothing. It's a real naysayer. And then 2019, JP Morgan has a coin. So, there's all these changes, but this latest, announcement from the OCC, I think it's a major step, and I'm, thrilled to see that.
I certainly agree. It is a real watermark in the history of cryptocurrency. It really is. I had a co-host that I have the show with who I think really said it best. He said they should declare this, looking back on this, as like National Crypto Day, because it really is going to be that important of a watermark, really. And I really do believe that. It is a real watermark moment for this space. Now, you said something, well, you said a lot of things that were very interesting, but one of the things that I know my audience is going crazy when they hear this right now is they're going to say, wait a minute, I heard her say Ripple. What did you do at Accenture when it came to Ripple? Can you expand on that a little more?
Sure. So with Ripple, I mean, what Accenture, we have a number of banking clients.
Sure.
They were all looking at Ripple, and we wanted to develop a partnership with them because we saw the opportunity, obviously, and so what our team did was just take a look at from a, as you do with any partner, you look at the technology, you look at the operations, you look at how they're going to market. Basically, it was an opportunity for our teams, the different parts of our teams, to be able to work with the company, get familiar with who they are, get comfortable, and to move forward in some form of partnership. That's when they started to look at even validators, when Ripple was looking at different types of validators. So that whole time was really just spent going through all of that. We spent time talking to the executives at that time. Chris Larson was CEO, Brad Garlinghouse COO, and we spent time with them. So a lot of the leaders of different parts of our practices got to meet, etc. So it was really a time of just learning, as well as being able to ensure that that from a practicality perspective that all the boxes were checked, and then subsequently the firm put money into I can't remember if it was a Series B, I think it was, and that was great. I think it was a signal to the market, our confidence in Ripple. It was also, quite frankly, a signal to the market to say, Accenture is in the game of blockchain and distributed ledgers. So it was a good move, and it was a good opportunity for the firm.
Yeah, and it seems to be that, I mean, obviously they're still partnered today, and they're on the cusp of doing some really impressive things around the world. I know Accenture just recently announced that they're working, I believe it was the Bank of England, on their payment system. And that is, I mean, it just goes to show the order of magnitude of exactly Accenture and the kind of things and partners they're working on and working with. So let's talk now about like coming back a little bit closer to what's going on today and the announcement of, you know, banks domestically here in the States, and certainly reminding the audience that this is a global initiative. You know, we're getting good news here domestically in the States, but this is happening all over the world. And when we look at this stuff, I think about, okay, you said supply chains, you talked about protocols. Let's talk about the protocols that are going to make all of this happen. I mean, I think currently today it's over 5,000 or 6,000 different coins in the space. I don't know that all those make it. We don't need 6,000 different protocols, do we? I mean,
no, I know, and that's, you know, that's always a big question. I think I want to step back, and before I even just get into a bit of that, just to also another perspective to give you is that, you know, with this pandemic, it's changed our society to the extent that, you know, we've had to work and live. I mean, we work, live, play. Now we're remote, and people have gotten used to being remote. Look at what we're doing here, and you know, individuals and companies have had to, you know, have embraced that, and you know, with this alone, there was, I think what we're seeing is because of that comfort level, because we know that there has to be changes with things like supply chains. So you talk about tokens, some of those tokens are tied in or linked to different blockchain platforms, and those tokens that are used for them. But I think the thing here is just, you know, just when you see what's going on, there's this acceleration that's happened. Acceleration, the whole digitization, and this is, you know, I've been on a number of different panels where they talk about digitization and transformation, and the digitization of assets. And you know, I was just at participated in an investor summit, and in this there was a panel, you know, and certainly Greg Kidd was part of that panel, as was JP Taro, linked to Bill Lasaris. I mean, and they were talking about what question that was posed to them was, if you had to today make your choice between investing in crypto or infrastructure, you know, what would you suggest? And you know, I think that they all agree that, you know, crypto has certainly been fun. I mean, there was a major ramp, and but today, that, you know, given where we're at, that it's the legacy, it's they called kind of the picks and shovels companies that are working on that. And so, like, back to the OCC and the SEC, and, you know, you could see the sea change because people recognize that this is becoming more mainstream. And so, you know, we're as a society, you know, are getting used to, you know, doing how we're doing. I think when we come out of this pandemic, there'll be a lot of changes. And so, you know, when you talk about all those different protocols, I mean, there are governments that are looking at their own, yes, the CBDC, which is the central bank digital currencies, Bank of England, the Canadian Bank, the Bank of Canada. They're all, I think in Singapore, a number of them are all testing. I think in China they have one as well. I mean, they're all testing and looking at these CBDCs because they see that, you know, this is, you know, kind of where it's trending towards. So I think that, I don't think that there'll be all these protocols. I think that you'll see a lot more companies, and I know that there are companies that are working on interoperability between these different blockchains. So how these currencies will all interact and themselves is, you know, still remains to be seen. I mean, you see all these different exchanges out there today, but there's not 5,000 tokens on these different exchanges.
Well, so. Exactly. That's such a good point. Now, you made a lot of good points in there. Let me see if we can unpack this a little bit. I mean, it's so much. I just want to talk to that just that little spot you had there was so good. You talked about the picks and shovels, the brick and mortar that's behind a lot of these techs and networks and things of that. Okay, so let's, you know, I tell people on the channel here, I talk all the time. I mean, Coinbase has indicated they're going to IPO here soon. Ripple has indicated that they intend to IPO pretty much over the next 12 months of this year, right?
Correct.
You know, and then we know that there's others out here, Palantir, there's a couple others that are headed to that same place. You know, I feel like this is the beginning of the .com era for crypto. I mean, would you feel the same way about that? I mean, you know, and I don't, what I mean is, look, I know the stock market causes bubbles. The tech doesn't cause a bubble. The stock market does, you know, but what I mean by that is a healthy way of saying that the growth is here. The investors and the large money are really doing more than just testing this tech. They're getting in and they're using it. It's an integration into their business models now. It's not just, hey, I think this could work. Let's have one more conference. You know, I mean, that they're here. They're really here moving in.
They are. And you know, if I could just make a little plug, there's a company that I sit on the board of. It's called Cambiatus, and they're a Latin American company, and their platform is EOS based. And they, in particular, are working with various cooperatives. And their solution really is to help these cooperatives have a plan B. And so I'm getting to one point that I want to make sure that it's clear is that why some of these cryptocurrencies are, you know, garnering more interest. In the case of Cambiatus, what they're basically doing is providing these co-ops with a plan B. So they've got these complementary currencies, and this isn't new. You know, they often talk about like what's happened in Switzerland. They have a currency called WIR, W-I-R, and it's been around since the 1934, and it was designed so that you know, when there's a depression. So what happened in this pandemic is that people, you know, A, they're not working, so there's less currency, or B, people are holding because fiat currency because they're nervous. Yeah. So what does that do? Well, people still need to be able to buy and sell from each other. And if fiat currencies are, you know, diminished in terms of supply, then what do? And so this is what happened with this in Switzerland. So they came up with this, they developed, and it was pegged 1 WIR to 1 Swiss franc, but they were not interchangeable. And I think today, I should remember the numbers, but tens of thousands of businesses are using WIR. But it's a complementary currency, not necessarily a replacement of. And so this is what they are doing, is helping these cooperatives build a complementary currency to enable them to have a plan B. And the currency really it does more than that. I mean, incentivizes certain types of behavior and you know, allows for the co-op to be able to flourish and to grow based on certain actions that they need the co-op to do. So so it's you know, you see these types of initiatives. I mean, these co-ops have been using this now for about a year, and they're growing. So it's not just a nice thing to do. These are real requirements and real needs that are not necessarily being served with the traditional fiat currency.
It's exciting because what you're highlighting here and talking about really makes me want to, I want to instantly project and try to forward think, what does this space look like 5 years, 10 years from now? And, you know, as I sit here today, I mean, we can't really truly know what proves out, because it's got to be, the tech has got to go to work, right? It's got to go to work, and it's got to show everybody in 6 months, a year, 18 months, who still remains and who doesn't, because that's what happened in the .com era. The tech ruled the day, and that's why I say that the stock market causes a bubble, but the tech proves out, and that's how you get the Googles and the Amazons and all of these that remain and live through those moments. But when I look and I try to be forward thinking, I can't see anything at this point right now other than more currencies and more coins and tokens running around this world than I ever have imagined possible in my life. But that poses more of a problem we have today. And today we have a problem, as you know, working at Accenture, you know, with payments and the friction of fiat to fiat and settlement. And if in fact this world blooms and blossoms in the way of every business having a token and every this and that having a token and a digital dollar and a digital this and that and a tokenized bond and a tokenized security, which I think is all here. I know that there was a company, ARCA, not long ago, even got approval from the SEC to do treasury bills, US treasury bills, which is exciting. So when I think of all of that, I think of all this tokenization. There's this digital friction that exists as we have fiat friction. And I just feel like there's a company like Ripple and the asset XRP that is poised, and maybe even in cases too, Ethereum and maybe some other actors, EOS even maybe, you know, that can solve these problems for all of this friction happening in this new digital world. Your thoughts, Diane?
I agree, and that was something that was looked at, I think, as one of the things that Ripple saw themselves as a play, as being like a settlement currency. Yeah. Because that's, you know, as you say, with all these, with the multitude of tokens that are out there. Listen, I don't think that all those tokens that are out there today are going to be, you know, in 5 years, you know, they may be there, but there's nothing being done with them. You know, right. You still need a certain amount of, you know, you need people to actually use it. And what I would say is slightly different about this, and I touched on this a little bit, around the whole governance structure, because to me that's a huge issue. And now we're talking about, you know, monetary systems, we're talking about financial systems, we're talking about the way we think about ourselves as a society. So it has those social implications. And so, but the difference with these types of tokens is it's kind of a ground up. So Ripple has come in. They have, you know, kind of figured out the, you know, the rails and how to settle between countries, and so that, which is a big play. But you know, the reason I'm again still bullish on what I think is different today is that a lot of these are, you know, ground up type of tokens and applications. So I think it, you know, it gets, you know, people, there's a lot of our society that's unfortunately been left behind. So that current systems don't support or, you know, help to build on those communities. So, but nonetheless, as you said, you know, every country has a multitude of these tokens, and yet, you know, you still have to be able to settle out and be able to move cross-border.
Isn't a large part of this also about, you know, I mean, with the CBDC movement, and you talk about the market infrastructure and all of these things, you know, isn't a large part of this about developing the virtual framework that can be regulated, right? I mean, don't we, in fact, isn't what we see taking shape now analogous to the internet you and I are using right now versus the dark web?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was going to say something. I mean, remember when we first saw the internet come to being, you know, people were saying, no, you know, it's just, you know, for all illicit or, you know, illegal goods being served. And you know, today, I mean, we're now moving into Web 3.0 with spatial web, and it's just really exciting. You know, I see the same, obviously the same pattern moving forward as well with crypto. So yeah, I think that's, you know, there's that level of maturity and change that's happening now, and you know, things are still being worked out. You know, not every country, you know, some countries are further ahead. I do want to say that, you know, with the regulation, and of course the U.S. has this you know, they have their own regulatory frameworks and these different bodies, you know, they're both federally and state-wise. You know, it is very challenging in the U.S. to innovate because you've got all these different bodies that you have to navigate around and please. I think that, you know, the whole idea, even when you think about Bitcoin in the first place, was no worry about regulation, just being able to show that you can do, that there is an internet of value that can work here, and it was proven out. And you know, Ripple has certainly figured that all that out as well. So so you know, that, you know, one of the challenges that I had, you know, even trying to figure out a digital wallet is, you know, where do you live and where am I sending money to? So whose regulation do we need to, to work with? And I'm fortunate. I have dual citizenship, both Canadian and American. And if I'm living in Canada and we have different restrictions in the U.S., but then what if I'm living in France? Like, so which regulation are you going to apply to that transaction? So again, like, I think it's not. These are the things that have to be still thought through, and to make this work. But the whole idea with decentralization is the notion of that. It's not going to be one body, not one jurisdiction that's going to tell you what to do. That was kind of the free thinking with Bitcoin.
No, absolutely. Well, what's interesting is that, and obviously, with any young space, there's a lot of maximalists, and right. The Bitcoin diehards are Bitcoin diehards. I got to give it to them. Anti-government, anti-bank, and I've been a Ripple XRP person. I've taken a lot of heat on my channel as an investor, and a commentator in the space, because I do want to see the regulatory framework come about, because I know that the institutions won't come without it. I know the banks won't come without it. I know the ability to settle with clearinghouses and derivatives and
I understand that. Yes.
Yeah, it won't come without it. However, I do see Bitcoin having a long life, because to some degree, we're still seeing investment funds create, companies create investment funds, and they're doing better than ever. And I just don't know if, I feel like government's going to come in and maybe regulate the proof of work side of this, because it takes me to a segue of another question I want to go here with you. One is, do you see them regulating the proof of work side of the mining? And two, maybe it's an illusion, I don't know, but I'm of the thought that maybe someday we see all pre-mined Bitcoin placed on something like the XRP ledger. And if it's pre-mined, it could be represented on the ledger. You could control the regulation of this. Maybe they do cap gains taxes on the miners and then place it on as a currency. I don't know. I'm free thinking here a moment. We're just having a conversation, but it leads me to another point about XRP that I want to ask you. It's always been a question whether it's a security or not, and I obviously feel it's not a security. I know Chris Giancarlo feels it's a currency, in fact, and so do I. And I would like to get your opinion, as well as whether Bitcoin's life proof of work is happening. Do you someday see something like a convergence of the ledger like that with Bitcoin? And do you see, or did you see in your time of doing due diligence with XRP, what is that to you? Is that a security? Is it a commodity? Is it a currency? Because I have trouble seeing it, Diana, work any other way than a currency the way it's designed.
Well, so, there was, at that time, you're aware with the issue that, one of the issues that Ripple had, because the way FinCEN was looking at the XRP. And so, I know that the SEC has deemed, well, Bitcoin and Ethereum are, they don't deem them securities. And so I'm not sure why they, why they would put XRP in something into a different category. Because I agree. I think the XRP itself is more of a currency. The XRP was originally was one of the use cases for it was as an anti-spam for the Ripple network. So there was also utility capabilities within it, right?
Yeah.
So and so I tend to agree with you that I think it's probably falls more into that kind of currency bucket. Like, whatever they deemed Bitcoin, how is this? I don't think that it's one and the same. Like, I don't think it's different. Excuse me. So it was never clear to me why that was kind of a holdout in terms of, if you look at those other two assets, Ethereum and Bitcoin, that why they would separate out XRP. It just, I don't know if it was more political or whatever, but it just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it certainly has left a lot of questions in the space we're in with myself and a lot of people that ponder about it. But I mean, my personal thought on it, you know, because we're just having a conversation about it, but my personal thought on it is that, you know, I believe that XRP has a very good chance to be that banker coin that was suggested in the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference. And with the dollar currently falling off a cliff right now, and there being a global liquidity crisis before the pandemic actually even hit,
Yeah.
I think we're in a position where, I mean, it's actually designed for a moment like this, to be honest. I mean, and you pointed out earlier, you know, the pandemic has accelerated this whole idea and notion that we are really truly in a digital world, and we have to rely on a digital world.
Correct. And it's, you know, it'll be interesting, I think, the next 12 to 18 months to see how we are interacting as a society, and what, you know, what, there's going to be different kinds of frameworks out there. And so, and I think it's all good. I mean, the acceleration has been a good thing. I mean, we were forced to, you know, forced to be in this position. And, you know, every time people are in a crisis or backs against the wall, you know, the pandemic, I'm not minimizing it, saying, I mean, it's obviously there's been terrible issues with it, but the on the other side of that is I think that there's some very good things that, when, like we're seeing now, and innovation that's occurring that people didn't have to think about before. But now, you know, it's, and, you know, the supply chain is one big area that they need to rethink, and how to do that in a cost-effective way.
Absolutely. So you talked about like face recognition and a lot of things that I think over the next coming months or years are really going to start to develop to a much greater degree for us. And they may feel a little far off for some people, but you know, in this digital age, we're moving into security is such an issue, right? Having your own identity and being able to control who gets to know what about you, as well as your finances, right?
Correct.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, identity, that's one of those things that, one of those areas that, you know, if you just step back and think about, well, you have a bank account, you have a, you know, you have a card, but all of those have numbers, and those numbers are just a proxy to you and to me. So if your identity is solid and trustworthy and verifiable, then why not just use that to be able to just transfer money between you and me, because we know who we are, and so, and it's not just commerce. You think about, you know, we think about health records or any other assets that we have in order for us to be able to operate the way we do. And again, this comes back to everything being digital and being remote. For me to be able to work with someone, you know, across the pond, or, you know, if you need to know, you know, the health of that individual, like, it should be, all of this should be easy. Like, it shouldn't be, you know, right now we all have all these different medical records, we've got all these different banking relationships, you have all these different government relationships, and yet, you know, it's about you and me, and we should be the controller of those assets. Those are our assets, financial, health records, etc. And so having these distributed amongst all these different people, or all these different institutions, and that data, and, you know, the issues with data breaches, etc. You know, these different. So, you know, Greg is working on global ID. There are other, you know, Hyperledger, you know, with the self-sovereign identity. That is, you know, I see a lot of different applications of that, because, you know, even from a corporate perspective, you're still an individual within that corporation. You still have your own digital footprint within that corporation, and yet even within those large enterprises, they have a challenge of trying to figure out who you are, and do you have access, can you have access, because we don't know your permissions. And so all of those things, just they're way far more complicated than they need to be. And so, you know, I think that these different projects, initiatives around, you know, a digital identity certainly makes sense, because, again, as I said, when you think about identity, you have all kinds of assets that you have, and it's on paper or wherever. Why not be all maintained by the individual and shared where they want to share it versus, having it under someone else's control?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt. Yeah. One of the benefits of actually moving into this digital age, right? Okay.
Yes.
So let me ask you, instead of forward thinking 5 or 10 years, what's something you think you'll see before the end of the year? Now, I know that we're getting another a full federal charter from Brian Brooks from the OC domestically here in the States. So I want to remind everybody in the audience that's supposed to be put out in the fall, I believe.
Should be interesting.
Should be.
Yeah, I'm excited about that because I think that I think it was alluded to the fact of he's looking at some sort of new payment schema. So one of the issues today, if you have, I want to send you some sort of cryptocurrency within a wallet. The whole notion of having, there are these state licenses, the MTLs, the money transmission licenses, and you need to be able to have that kind of a partner or have that kind of a license. Well, basically, I think that the thought is that that's going to be done away with. There'll be a schema which you don't have to concern yourself quite, and how they're going to put what that's going to look like. Still to be seen, but the point is that it's going to take away that hurdle. That's not necessarily it's not necessary.
One of the things that I thought Brian Brooks said that was just really kind of shined a light on things for me from a different perspective is that he just did an interview with Brookings Institute with Aaron Klein, and it was an incredible conversation. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but
no.
Yeah, and it was just remarkable. And what he talked in there about was a level playing field, which we hear everyone use all the time. And one of the points he made about level playing field, which was just a fresh way to see and understand it from his point of view, wasn't just about leveling the playing field for everybody. He talked about all over the years with the tech of the PayPals and the Venmos and the this one and the that one, the Stripes and the this one and that one, as well as the crypto space. There has been a lot of transaction volume, payment volume that has been bled off of the banking system. And to really provide a level playing field means to bring everybody to the level and standard that the banks have had to adhere to for all these years. Because if they're going to get to play in their world, they should be held to that standard. And I felt like what an eye-opening way to see that, because I do believe that we don't yet have the virtual framework that regulators can truly regulate. They can't really regulate properly until there's a virtual a field to play on, right? And when I see Brian Brooks make that kind of a comment, I feel like, and I'm not suggesting like he's working in tandem with the banks or anything of that nature. What I'm suggesting is that he recognizes that the technology out here is growing so quickly and so fast. You got to make the regulation more clear to be more inclusive, to make everybody at a higher prudential and a higher standard. Would you agree with that?
I do, and I think you raised a really good point. The issue right now, and if first of all, the growth of people participating in cryptocurrencies is just gets larger every year. So something has to be put in place, and I think it's great that someone with his background, because he did come from Coinbase, he's over at at the regulator, and to me, some of the big challenges is that the people that are in those positions really, to me, don't necessarily understand the implications of a lot of this technology. So rather than trying to squeeze the technology in a box which negates its value, rather, like you said, there should be a framework by which the legacy players. The legacy players or institutions, they still serve a purpose, so how can we get the best of both worlds if that's possible? And in order for any sort of regulation to be applied, I think you first really need to get under and understand what these technologies can do. What is your goal of being able to enable them, or putting that framework around it? Like, what is it that you're trying to achieve out of all of this? It's not necessarily, in some cases it might be just a replacement. It's still early, but I think that what I'm encouraged is that you have people like Brian there to start to figure some of this out, who's got an understanding and awareness around what these coins can and cannot do.
Yeah, his vision and understanding of this space and the innovation in tech is absolutely mind-blowing to me. Every time I listen to him talk, I mean, I could feel my IQ going through the roof, because he's coming at it not only from an understanding of the innovation in tech, but as a lawyer in the regulatory side. And he just has such a way, and he's a brilliant communicator. So when he really lays it down, he can lay it down in such a clear and concise way to make it's actually not complicated at all. And he's so good at being able to deliver the message of what needs to be understood about where we are right now today. And that is really exciting. And so do you, Diana. So this has been an incredible conversation. I want a final thought this thing. So tell me, what is your final thought where we're at right now?
God, I think we are just on the, like you said, just on the precipice. I think that I'm so excited for the next year to 2 years, because just what's actually going on with the web, the spatial web, you've got that all happening, and now with these guidance by the OCCs and the SECs or whatever, that you'll see, I think, more and more better applications, more maturity out of these technologies, because they're not going to be trying to fit within a framework that doesn't really apply. So I'm really just bullish. I think that and what I'm really bullish about is look, you and I, we can move about in society. We have no issues. We're very, very fortunate, very privileged. There's a lot that aren't. And I think that, to me, I'm hoping, like you talk about inclusivity and you talked about what Brian's thinking about around that, that's really the way we all need to be thinking about these things. And so that's what's got me excited and wanting to participate and keep working on companies like Cambiads, because I think that's the right tone. That's sending the right message to the world.
That's wonderful. Well said. I just got to echo the sentiment. You really said it. And it is all-inclusive innovation, is an all-inclusive moment in history. And I don't believe someone like Brian's going to miss that by a long, he's going to land the plane when it comes to that. He's going to include everybody. And I look at what the OC is coming out with in the fall, and I look forward to that. And what I really see in the macro sense of that federal charter is our first real deal regulatory sandbox for crypto and blockchain. And I couldn't.
Yeah, that would be so cool, because I know that they've got this in some of the other countries. So yes, absolutely right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Diana, thank you. Don't go anywhere. Stick around. But thank you so much for being here. This has been a wonderful conversation.
I love this. Thank you. I really appreciate the time and having the dialogue with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.